This episode of the Billionaire Lifestyle Podcast is sponsored by Jamie's Designs, your one-stop shop for custom laser creations, gifts, and home decor. Looking for a special present for a loved one? Stop by Etsy at Jamie's Designs Shop, or visit us on Facebook or Instagram by following the link in the show description, or type at JAMIESDES on your device. We are making your laser dreams come true. Welcome to the Billionaire Lifestyle Podcast with your host, Emmett Muckles. Please visit iTunes, Stitcher, or emmettmuckles.com to listen to all the episodes for free.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Billionaire Lifestyle Podcast with Emmett Muckles, me and my friends. And what my friends understand is that they are already billionaires. They may have gone through some issues, they may have done some things, they may have, baby mama drama, whatever. But they're still billionaires and they're very uniquely human. This is what I need you guys to realize. You're all special. You're all unique under the sun. And I'm going to get to why under the sun is so important because it's very prevalent. Remember, what constitutes you as a billionaire is that when your mommy and your daddy got together, they gave up some stuff. She took it in. 2 to the power of 30 in replication is over 1 billion cells, and you weren't even on the planet. My message is done for the day, as we usually do. Today, my guest is Josh Shea. We're going to talk about things that people go through, but they don't talk about. I don't talk about it. I may have an issue. You may have an issue. My wife may have an issue. I know my buddy does, but we're going to talk with Josh about that. What's up, Josh?
Not much, Emmett. How are you doing this fine evening?
I'm good. When we connected, and you may have a difference of opinion, or you may say, yeah, you're right. I thought of Terry Crews.
Well, yeah, I mean, I understand the physical resemblance, but yeah, no, he's kind of the he's the one celebrity poster boy who has spoken out about porn addiction. There are a few other guys who have mentioned having issues with it. Probably one of the bigger names recently is Chris Rock has come out and talked about it.
Oh, he did?
Yep. But most people in Hollywood, just like most people in the rest of America and literally the rest of the world, don't want to talk about pornography, certainly don't want to talk about it if they have an issue with pornography. So despite the fact that there are a lot of issues happening in this world around pornography right under our nose, nobody's referring to it. Nobody's talking about it because it's naked people, it's sex. It talks about those little things that get us off in the back of our mind that we don't want to tell people about. We're still a puritanical society, whether we want to face it or not.
Say that again, because this is very real. America is a puritanical society, and I had a guest on a couple of years ago. We were talking about sex, and he's basically laid it out for me. He was like, your framework, your mindset, your firmware is all British based.
Yes.
I was like, I had never thought of it that way. When you bring in the Catholic Church, you bring in Protestants, you bring in Catholicism, you bring in England, the Church of England. It's all part of the colonized mind. When I go other places, nudity, pornography, well, it depends on what you refer to as pornography, but they're not so uptight about some of the things that Americans are uptight about. And I think a lot of it, and we're probably going to get into it, I think a lot of it is because we're so uptight about it, this is where a lot of this comes from.
Well, exactly. We live in a shame-based society. We live in a society where we don't live and let live. We constantly judge. I mean, I'm sure people will be watching this years in the future, but at this point where we are in our country, it's so divided. The most important thing you can do right now is win an argument. And it doesn't even seem to matter what the argument is about. And so you're going to have, a whole lot of people who, judge on pornography, judge on masturbation. Forget the fact that statistics show that more than 50% of men and women who are under 50 years old look at porn and masturbate at least once a month. Everybody pretends that they don't do it. Because of the wonderful COVID thing going on, I haven't been able to go out and do presentations about pornography like I have done the last couple of years. And when I go to a college, kids, while they all think that they're, super liberal or super open-minded or super ready to tackle anything, when I come out to give a presentation, the first thing I say is, so, by show of hands, who here masturbates? and people just look at me shocked. And then my follow-up line is, nobody's raising their hand because they're busy. I see. and I have to lighten the tone immediately, because these are issues we don't want to talk about. These are issues we want to pretend that maybe it's somebody else is doing it, and I don't want them to know I do it. But, geez, if 35% of internet searches are pornography-based, somebody's looking at this stuff. And based on the statistics, since the internet has come along, and, you and I didn't grow up on the internet as young boys, but since the internet's come along, boys and girls, but a lot of boys are getting sexualized earlier. Yeah. And they're being shown this stuff that you and I had to be lucky to find a magazine to know anything about what was happening. And this is just being fed to them so much that there are a lot of problems now being discovered, because we're in a world where what has 20 years of unfettered access to pornography done? We can now measure that, because there are very few people under 30 who ever remember a world without the internet. And we've got the statistics now on what happens in 20, 30 years. And we talk about how we're a puritanical society that still has that European brain in us. Well, 50, 60 years ago, it was a big thing for a woman to wear a two-piece, bathing suit, not even a sexy one, something like your grandma would wear out to the lake that showed this much stomach. And now we have over 1 million people joining OnlyFans this year to have do-it-yourself porn. So
let's talk about
you can't
that.
tell me in 50 years to go from this prudish attitude to this, hey, everybody, look at my boobs. You can't tell me that the little worm mind we have, the little rat mind we have, has evolved so much that this kind of sexuality or this change in sexuality in only 50, 60 years is one that we can actually keep up with, because the mind doesn't work like that. Technology goes so much faster than the human mind can evolve.
So let's digress. I have a bunch of questions for you. But
sure.
What got you here? What got you to now? I mean, you didn't wake up and say at 13 and say, when I grow up, I'm going to talk about pornography. Something had to draw you to this, because it is a taboo subject. It's a taboo subject from people who are very close. It's a taboo subject for people who are married. Yeah. They don't even want to talk about it. So what brought you to where these discoveries?
Well, my story is very, very typical for a porn addict. I had unresolved trauma for years and years. That was the result of abuse that took place when I was a kid at the hands of a babysitter, both sexual and mental / emotional, for about 4 or 5 years. And I used porn. This was between the ages of probably 3 and 7, 3 and 8. And then about age 12, my older cousin showed me Penthouse or Hustler, some hardcore magazines. And I tell you, Emmett, it was like a light shined down from above. Whoa. And the moment I saw it, I knew that this was something different. This was something special. And I don't even think it had to necessarily do with what I was seeing on the page. This was just because I had seen, naked people on HBO before,
right?
But I had never seen anything like this. And this just said to me, this is going to be special. This is going to make you feel better. And the only other time I've ever had that feeling was about 2 or 3 years later, the first time that I ever got drunk. And suddenly felt better, suddenly felt at ease with myself, felt okay with myself. And what I learned years later is that in discovering pornography and discovering alcohol, I found a way to essentially repress those memories of what happened to me when I was a kid. They helped me escape to somewhere else to the point that I forgot what happened, or mostly forgot what happened. And then in my life, whether I was in high school or college or a young professional not yet married, or married with a wife and kids and having a couple great jobs, I used pornography and I used alcohol as crutches. No matter what was going on in my life, no matter who was in my life, those times, if I look through the timeline where things were worse, where I felt most out of control, those were the times that I used the most alcohol and certainly the most pornography, because those were the things that made me feel better. Those were the things that put me at ease. They were like my medicines. They provided that stimulation in my mind. They were the dopamine and oxytocin and serotonin hits that my mind needed to just keep going and go to the next day. Because, it's what happens with every addict. Obviously, if you're a gambling addict, you're going to go broke quick.
Let me interrupt you a bit.
Let me just finish. If you're a heroin addict, you're going to have all kinds of other health problems. But addiction is addiction in the mind. And I was stuck with 2 addictions that, for good or bad, my mind said I needed all the time.
So with that, and in your travels, is it highly related to trauma, or what if there's just somebody who just really likes women? Or I can't even say really likes women, because I'm thinking of it from a masculine perspective. What if just someone just is into sex and they don't have the social skills to facilitate that? Because you get the same kind of rush when you're seeking that act, love,
right,
like, infatuation. It's very similar, that dopamine rush, like when you're in love.
Right. But you're chasing that dopamine rush for different reasons. And I work with a lot of partners of porn addicts, almost exclusively women. And one of the first things I have to do is understand their story, because in a lot of cases, their partner is not a porn addict. He just happens to really like pornography and not care what she thinks. It really is about the use of it. Why are you using this material? When I realized this through recovery and dealing with people, but the reason I had these addictions, the alcohol was about numbing myself.
Right.
It just numbed me down. And most people get that, because even if you're not an alcoholic, you've been drunk, or you know what being buzzed is like. It just made me numb, which was great. The pornography gave me a false sense of control in my life. And if you think about this, it makes sense, because when you open up that magazine, or when you call up that video on the screen, the person on the screen can't say no to you. They can't tell you to take out the trash. They can't say you're not doing a good enough job, not doing well enough at your job today. You are not going to have to deal with any of the nagging or stress from other people in the world when you're sitting there looking at pornography. And you know what, frankly, if today I want to see a guy and a girl go at it, and tomorrow I want to see 2 Asian women go at it, and the day after that I want to see all really tall people go at it, there's something
true
for everybody out there.
I mean, literally everybody.
Well,
there's something.
Yes. You want to watch a black person screw a Mexican screw a horse while a leprechaun throws tater tots at them and heavy metal music is playing. I guarantee you work hard enough, you'll find that out there. what this did for me, at least, this made me feel like I was in control. I stopped the video when I wanted. I started the video when I wanted. I saw what I wanted. Nobody said no to me. I was in charge of my little world when I was in front of the screen. Because one of the things that happened to me as a kid was that I developed my survival skills. I developed my coping skills at a time that there was some really traumatic abuse happening to me, which is the case with most porn addicts. Patrick Carnes, who's the big researcher in this area, he found that 70% of males have had physical abuse, who are porn addicts. 80% have had sexual abuse. And get this, about 95% have had emotional or mental abuse. So you're largely talking almost every man who has a porn addiction, who seeks porn out almost as a medicine. Not necessarily to watch naked people, not necessarily to watch people go at it, but because it's giving them something else in their mind, it's helping them create these chemicals that they need to feel better. That's what addiction is. And when I deal with these partners, I have to say to them sometimes, I don't think that you're dealing with an addict. I think you're dealing with a guy who probably shouldn't have settled down because he hasn't sowed his wild oats yet, or he doesn't care what you think, or he's not a healthy sexual person. You know, there are plenty of marriages that break up, in large part because of sexual issues that have nothing to do with addiction. Unhealthy sexuality is just something that's out there. Addiction can, contribute to it, but it's a different thing. And really, addiction is all about the intent. Addiction is all about the why.
What about, there's so many areas that we can go in. One of the things that I want to find out, because I was about a year ago, I would see these pictures on Instagram. I was like, oh, that's a nice looking woman, or that woman works out really well. And then you click on the picture, it takes you to their page. And I would see this OnlyFans. And then, once you click on one, they give you more of what you clicked on.
Yeah.
So all of a sudden I start seeing, and they take the algorithm of your demographic. So all of a sudden I'm seeing people that look like the lady at the grocery store with an OnlyFans page. What is the proliferation of pornography? How is it shifted? Because I realized something when I saw that. Now my 11-year-old has access to this stuff 24/7.
Yeah. And there are a lot of parents who think that they can put filters on their kid's phone and it'll all be okay. and I genuinely meet a lot of these people when I'm out giving speeches, and it's ridiculous because I have to tell them, congratulations, you locked down Junior's phone. There's only 4 billion other smartphones out in this world. And what happens when Junior is waiting for the bus to come and his 12-year-old friend who has no filters on his phone shows him some of the latest stuff from Pornhub? You tell me, what is Junior going to say? What is Junior going to do? What is Junior going to think? And if you don't know those answers, you're not talking to your kids about pornography enough. Throwing a filter on it is like trying to put a blindfold on them. They're going to do this plenty of times. And with pornography, parents need to realize this. With pornography, it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when.
Yeah, I believe
and
that.
A kid needs to be prepared for it. I don't think talking to your kids about porn is part of the birds and the bees speech.
It's just different now.
It's part of the stay away from drugs. Stay away. If you see a cigarette, don't pick it up.
Yeah.
If you see an open beer, don't drink it. I think that's where the pornography speech needs to be for younger kids. And that's the thing, is that there is this proliferation, especially because of the pandemic, of what's happened.
That's what I was going to ask you about. How does that change with COVID?
Well, it Pornhub, when COVID hit back in February of 2020, it hit Spain, France, and Italy very hard first. After it left China, it hit those 3 European countries. Pornhub thought they'd be cute, and they offered a week's free premium subscription service to anybody in one of those 3 countries stuck at home, because It's a great marketing idea. Yeah. You're stuck at home. You can't go see people. Well, I'm going to give you better porn access than you already have. Well, a few weeks later, when the whole world got the pandemic, Pornhub opened it up for everybody. And if you look, anybody can get to Pornhub. The Pornhub premium site needs $10 a month. And before you could even look at the free stuff, you had to put in your credit card just to let them know if you didn't cancel, right, you would do this. So everybody on earth has access to this one free month or free week of pornography, and then is going to start paying for it. And if you look at the website statistics back from February, March, April. And if you look at the statistics that Pornhub themselves put out, which I always take with a grain of salt, it did show a huge jump in some of the places in Italy and France. From 2019 to 2020, day to day, they were up 75% in viewership.
Wow!
If you look at just the premium side of things, they were up from January to March, they were up over 100%. So they were raking in the money. Now, that's on the viewership side. What happened with everybody now in quarantine, stuck sitting at home, for the first time ever, the online porn industry essentially ran out of material. They needed new stuff. And one of the issues is with the proliferation of cam sites, which OnlyFans is not really a cam site, it's more of a X-rated social media.
Yeah.
But it's these websites that have the cam models needed more cam models than ever before, because there was this giant push in quantity of porn being watched, and there wasn't enough to go around, really, or enough new material to go around, because porn is one of those things. Once you use it, you never need that again. You need something new, so they have to continually be creating new material. They were literally putting out press releases trying to get furloughed fast food workers to come to sites to do the porn stuff.
You mean to like be cam people or something like that?
To be cam girls or cam guys. Yeah, there were websites, and most of these websites work on a 50-50 split between when a user spends money, you get 50 cents of the dollar they gave us, we get 50 cents. A lot of these sites had to go up to 75 cents or 80 cents for the porn creator, because it was almost a bidding war where people were going with the better places. And for the men and women who couldn't quite bring themselves to do one-on-one live interaction on cam websites, well, there's OnlyFans. Because when people ask me what OnlyFans is, I tell them it's like Facebook meets Etsy. That's really what it is when you think about it, because you've got these people who have these pages that look like Facebook, and they make pornography in the comfort of their own home, from PG-13 all the way up to XXX, whatever they're comfortable with. It's not like they're on a stage at a strip club. It's not like they have to interact, one-on-one like a cam model does. If they don't want to make movies, they only take pictures. They do whatever they want. And this has been a way for so many people, especially young women, 18 to 25, to make a living, and even make a better living during the pandemic than they were doing beforehand. In January of 2020, there was 8 million people looking at OnlyFans who are registered subscribers.
Wait a minute, how many people?
8 million. Beginning of 2020, 8 million. Beginning of 2021, it's estimated there will be 50 million subscribers. And at the beginning of 2020, there was just under 300,000 content creators. And if we're to believe the CEO's statistics, there will be between 1.3 and 1.5 million creators come January 1st, 2020. So that means that more than 1 million people made the decision in 2020 to become do-it-yourself pornographers with themselves as the subject of the pornography. And we've never had that happen on Earth because OnlyFans cracked the code. And I think you'll understand this as a guy who's, in my age bracket. OnlyFans cracked the code that we all were hoping would get cracked one day. It's pornography of people we know.
That's true. I mean, literally.
Think about Playboy magazine in 1990 or 1985, girls of the blah, blah. Oh, I wonder if there's a girl I went to high school with who's in here. What would it be like if Miss November was, a girl I knew? What would it be like to put on a porn movie and suddenly see someone I know? Well, it's everywhere now, and especially for the 30-year-old and under group, OnlyFans is a way of life for them. They don't have as much stigma around pornography because they grew up in the era of the internet. They don't have as much stigma about nudity as people who are over 30 years old. So this OnlyFans is an everyday part of their culture. But you ask the average 60-year-old, what's OnlyFans? They have no idea. I mean, it's such a cultural shift in pornography and in attitudes about pornography just in the last 30 years. And we've reached this place with OnlyFans where, for the first time, I wonder if we are going to get porn addicts who are addicted to making it. Because my last book, which was called Porn in the Pandemic,
let's see that.
Here's a plug.
I like that.
That's my third book. I interviewed a lot of these cam models, both men and women, and a lot of these OnlyFans models. And what was fascinating to me is while they're making crazy money, or at least most of them are making crazy money, what they kept telling me was, I love the money, but I love that people tell me I'm special.
It's the attention.
Tell me I'm handsome, I'm pretty, and it's one of these things where it's like you're getting a dopamine hit.
Yeah,
you are getting the same hit that somebody is getting from looking at your stuff. And I wonder, are people going to get addicted to making porn? Are there, 20 years from now, is there going to be a 45-year-old woman who can't stop making porn, is only making a tenth of the money she's making now, but she needs to keep hearing, you're pretty. You're pretty. And that's why she's doing it every day. Is the making of pornography just going to be the opposite side of the coin of consumption of pornography? I think we're going to find out the hard way because all of a sudden we've got 1 million porn stars out there. What did we have when you and I were young and there was all these different video companies?
I had to see his catalog.
4,000 porn stars at a time. Now there's over 1 million. So I think as a society, it's going to be very interesting to see over the next 20 years what happens not only to the people who look at too much porn, what happens to the people who are making a lot of porn.
I have to ask you about this because you said this or alluded, you actually said it. There's a different mindset for someone who's under 30. Actually, you can break it down into generation. I mean, like 10-year periods. There's a certain mindset for somebody who is probably like 21. They're probably more open than any of us could probably think about because they've grown up with LGBTQ and the shift in consciousness. You got the people who are like 25 to 35, and it seems like there's a conservative ship that kind of flows up to when you get to somebody who's 60, they're like, what? That's what? I mean, there's outliers, of course.
Yeah.
But can this be managed in a healthy fashion in our society? Or will it just become the norm and spiral out of hand?
I tell people that I am not anti-pornography. Because I think being anti-pornography would be like banging my head against a wall. It's just pointless.
It is.
If you look at like caves in ancient Phoenicia, there are cave paintings that are pretty pornographic.
Yeah.
If you go to a fine arts museum and you look at what they have for, old Egyptian stuff, you're going to see some pretty nasty X-rated stuff painted on some of those vases and chiseled into some of the sarcophaguses. And so it's the visual depiction of sexuality has always existed. It's not going anywhere. What I am out there trying to tell people is that we need to teach people how to use this correctly. We need to teach people to recognize there could be problems. We need to teach people that this stuff can lead to addictive and negative behaviors. It can lead to negative attitudes and unhealthy sexuality. One of the stories that I have been telling a lot lately is that the final presentation that I gave before COVID kind of shut everything down was last December at a college. I was invited to speak to a women's sexuality group at a health center. There was about 20 young women there, between 18 and 22, I guess. Couple older ladies there who faculty or ran the health center, and I gave my presentation, lots of stats, lots of figures, some stories, and then I go to the Q&A part of it, and this one girl who's kind of quiet, probably about 20, raises her hand and says to me, I don't like having sex with virgin guys. And I said, okay, that's fantastic. What does that have to do with pornography? But I noticed all kinds of other women in the room going, yeah. So I said, so what does this have to do with pornography? And she said, well, if you think about it, pornography is sex ed for these boys now. You just said that most boys start watching porn regularly at 11 or 12, which is absolutely true. And she said, well, think about it. If their sex ed is pornography, even the most vanilla one man, one woman porn usually shows the man as the aggressor, often having his hand on her throat, bending the woman in like a pretzel in 100 different ways, saying horrible things to her. And that doesn't even talk about the degrading way that all of these film clips end. And think about it. You're laughing because it's
true.
It's true, but you know what a real relationship is.
Yeah.
That's not real.
No.
To a guy in his teens growing up, he doesn't know that porn is not a documentary. He doesn't know porn is not a reality show. People like you and I who are married, who have had relationships with women, we know that porn is fiction. And these guys don't know this. So they become 17, 18. They get with a woman for the first time actually to have sex. They start acting like these guys in the movies.
Is that what the girl was referring to?
Yes, exactly. She doesn't want to have to train this guy to not be a barbaric porn star like he's grown up watching. He's had the behavior model. And I know if you're watching, an orgy or if you're watching extreme stuff, that's one thing. But just
it's extreme.
A guy and a girl, it's extreme anyway. It's not what sex is like. And these women who I was in this group with, we started talking about this because I found it fascinating. And they said they don't want to train these boys or these young men how to have sex like a normal person. They just don't want to deal with it because all of them have ended up with a virgin at one time or another. And the guy acted like he was a porn star because that's what he knew. Now, this doesn't have anything to do with addiction per se. But what this talks about is how unhealthy our boys and our young men are growing up sexually these days.
But how do you get that through to them? Because
I'm glad.
No, this is a real quandary of mine because I've thought this for a while. If I said I didn't look at porn, I would be lying through my teeth. If any human in America who is not confined, you almost can't help but see it somewhere.
Right.
One of the things that stands out to me is like, this is so obtuse. Like, and to the point, because I don't watch other men have sex. I don't go like my boy's house, be like, you having sex today? I'm coming to watch, bro. No. So you begin to think, is this how other people are acting? Because that's all that you see. I mean, in every instance, you see this absolute out there, outlandish. It's almost what the Me Too movement was talking about. Like everybody's a douche bro.
Well, but here's the reality. Only 1 out of 5 women will actually allow anal sex to happen. Only 1 out of 8 women will allow a 3-way to happen. But you look at pornography and you just think they're doing it in the butt with everybody, because that's what porn gives you the fantasy of. It gives you that depiction. That's not real life.
Yeah.
And I think what we need to do, and you know, I feel horrible for the 18 to 30-year-olds. One of the few statistics I do still share from 2017, an organization called the Barna Group interviewed thousands of men. And between 18 and 30, they found that 33% of men said that they are either addicted to pornography, watch too much pornography, or have a problem with pornography. That's 1 out of 3 men, 18 to 30, who say they have an issue with pornography. So we need to do something, because those men are going to be 40 and 50 and 60.
Yeah.
And they're going to start to raise kids in a way where they don't really worry about pornography. And so you're going to have people younger, statistics have absolutely shown, that are watching at even greater rates. So what do? Unfortunately, those people who are 25 or 35, they're going to have to go and get some help for this. But I think what we have to do is not create new porn addicts, and we have to educate our kids about this. It sucks that in 2020 or 2021 that you have to actually talk about pornography with your kids. But hey, in the 1950s, they had to talk about nuclear war and air raid drills. There's always bad stuff when you're a parent that you have to warn your kids about. It changes generationally, and this is the generation that we need to get this pornography thing under control.
This is going to sound weird. My wife is from Austria, and she says, you know, a lot of the things that you guys deal with here, you don't necessarily see in her country in Europe, because they have legal prostitution. So it might be a scenario where when you're 17, 18, somebody takes you to a prostitute and says, I'm going to help you with this experience. And I'm talking men, of course. But how do we get past this scenario, because we are so inundated with the lure of pornography? You go to, it's in mainstream media. It is in pop culture. You can't tell me someone doesn't look at Cardi B and say, just Google search that, and it leads them down the rabbit hole. Or it makes them say, hey, I want to see a woman who looks like Cardi B. Next thing you know, you're on Pornhub. And I hate to say it that way because it's such a proliferation. But what is the remedy?
Well, like I said, I think, and I have made my mission to be education. And I think what we need to do, and I questioned what the right answer was for a long time. And I do some coaching and advising for people on the side who aren't quite ready for true therapy, but know they have an issue and just want to talk to somebody who's been there. And last year I had this 22-year-old kid. I'll call him Brian in this story.
There you go.
Yeah, and I do that because one of my good friends is named Brian, and he hates it when I name him this. When I name my porn guy Brian, and I'm doing a TED Talk next month, and this guy's going to be mentioned, and his name is Brian in that story too. So anyway, this guy Brian was 22 years old, and he contacted me and said, "Listen, I have kind of a normal life except for pornography and sex. And I've got an awesome girlfriend. Her name, again, not the real name, her name is Whitney. And she was 20 years old. She was a nursing student in college. This guy was the manager of a sporting goods store he started working at in high school. And very smart people, cool people. You'd want them to be your kids. You'd want them to be, your friends. Nice couple. And the problem was that Brian watched so much porn as a teenager that he was suffering from what is now known as porn-induced erectile dysfunction.
What?
And it's a lot of people call it PIED or PIED, porn-induced erectile dysfunction. It's hitting people in their late teens and in their 20s like we've never seen before. And it's not like typical erectile dysfunction. It is directly tied to pornography. In Brian's case, most of the time, he couldn't get an erection unless pornography was on in the room. He also, but here's the thing, he could never finish unless pornography was on in the room.
I'm laughing because it seems absurd to me, but that does make sense because I have a friend who works with young girls. She's shared a story with me that kind of blew my mind, and it totally made me rethink a whole bunch of things. But she said she had a counseling session with a young girl, and the young girl was distraught because she had had her first sexual experience. And when she took her clothes off, the boy freaked out because she was natural. She was unshaven. He had never seen that before because he had been looking at porn.
Yeah.
And it freaked him out, and it just kind of put her in like PTSD about sex. You know, and these are some of the things that we don't think about, how it affects our psyche if you're very young and that's all that you see, or the fact that it has to be on video for you to be turned on.
Right. Well, here's where this story, really gets into Absurdville. So because Whitney was a nursing student, she understood addiction very well. She didn't make Brian feel shamed or anything like that. And she actually, for a while, would have porn on their laptop playing, like sitting on their end table when they were having sex with each other. After a while, she started to feel like a third wheel because she noticed he was paying more attention to that because he could get off to that and not her. So in working with them, the three of us came up with this idea, and I did it. I mean, I don't want to say it was an experiment, but it was an experiment. I was curious what would happen. And what happened was that Whitney was on her laptop in their living room. Brian was in their bedroom on his laptop, and they had a sexting session. And Brian, watching Whitney on the laptop, was able to get an erection. And just about the point when he was, looking at the finish line, he yelled or something, and she came into the room, and they finished as quote unquote normal people without pornography playing, because Brian's brain told him, even though it was Whitney, even though she was in the other room, because it was on a screen, it was pornography.
Whoa. So that's mind blowing.
Now think about this. Now they're in real therapy now. Brian's on some medication, and things are getting better with them. But think about this: for a couple that's dealing with this, you would literally have to, if you wanted to have a baby, you would literally have to have pornography on when that baby was conceived. Now, there's a secret you're never going to tell your kid.
No.
Never. And the thing is, I believe, here's why I share this story. It's because I believe if we tell our 13 and 14-year-old boys the story of Brian, that they will think twice before getting too involved with addiction or getting too involved with pornography. You can let them know, yes, you will be interested in looking at this stuff. And boys at 13 and 14 don't want to be porn addicts. They want to have a girlfriend. Yeah. They want to eventually have sex with that girlfriend. But they'll take what they can now. Unfortunately, many of them will become addicted. And I think what the story of Brian shares that will hopefully scare the hell out of a 13 or 14-year-old boy is that if you look at too much pornography, essentially your penis will break. And not everybody in this world is like Whitney, who will have the compassion to try these different things to keep the relationship together. There are a lot of girls and women out there, much like the ones I met at that health center, who would just be like, no,
nope.
Forget this. He can't do this. And I understand both sides of it. And I think that if we can tell these 13 and 14-year-old boys, listen, you use too much of this stuff, here's what can happen. I think that may be our greatest deterrent against developing young porn addicts, or at least young male porn addicts. If you tell them some of the real dangers that can happen. I didn't end up a meth addict. I didn't end up a heroin addict. I don't smoke. My parents in school warned me about all of this stuff. So I made decent decisions. Now, had I learned about pornography from my parents and how bad it could be, had I learned it in school, might I have not become a porn addict? Maybe, maybe not. Who knows? But I'm sure we can reduce the numbers of porn addicts, and I'm sure that we can get to a place in society where we are a sexually more healthy society if we just, take the stick out of our butt, take that puritanical bonnet off our head and say, okay, this is something that's in the world. This is something we have to deal with. You don't have to be graphic about it. You don't have to show your kids pornography, and you can make it very age appropriate, even going down to 6-7 years old. If you see pictures of naked people, if a friend shows you pictures of naked people on their phone, come let mommy or daddy know. That's it. And then move on to how to cross the street correctly.
What other resources?
It doesn't have to be a big deal.
What other resources are out there for people, A, to understand what porn addiction is, B, education, and how to tackle this?
It is getting better as the scientific world, as the mental health world starts to recognize pornography addiction is a real thing. There are more certified sex addiction therapists now, or there are about 10 times more now than there were even 15 years ago. So there are a lot of therapists out there who are dealing with this as a specific problem. One of the reasons why I wrote 3 books was because when I finally decided to get into recovery, I went to the bookstore and I went to Amazon, and there was almost nothing for porn addicts. And I'm a professional writer by trade. I was a journalist for nearly 25 years. So I wanted to create some of these resources. So I wrote 3 books, and I have a website where I write a couple articles every week, either about addiction or about my recovery. There are 12-step groups, Sex Addicts Anonymous, Sexaholics Anonymous. There are online forums. Like I said, there's therapy. I went to inpatient rehab for 7 weeks in Texas back in 2015, which was hugely transformative for me. I wouldn't be the person I am today had I not spent those 7 weeks there. The big important thing to recognize is if you think you have a problem, look into it, talk to a professional, get it taken care of, or at least develop a strategy for it, because addiction only ends in, one of 5 places, usually more than that. You lose your job, you lose your family, you lose your friends, you lose your financial standing, or you get in trouble with the law. And after one or more of those 5 things happens, you either end up in recovery or you end up in an early grave. Yeah. Doesn't matter the addiction. That's what happens. And thankfully, I woke up and I went the recovery route. There are a lot of people who don't. And I stress to people, if you think you have an issue, go and find out with a professional. They're going to be your best choice. If you want any of my books, I also have an online course for partners of porn addiction. I mentioned I do some coaching, some advising. Visit my website. It is recoveringpornaddict.com. And I can help you out one-on-one if you want to talk specifically about it. But that, again, is recoveringpornaddict.com. And for
what are your books?
What's that?
What are your books?
My books, along with Porn in the Pandemic, which was my 3rd book that came out in early 2020, that's just more of a journalism type book. My self-help books are, my first one I wrote was called The Addiction Nobody Will Talk About. That is basically my autobiography, looking at the last 5-6 years of my addiction. And then I was shocked how well that book went, but I was shocked that half the messages and email I got when it came out were from partners. and partners who are like, what do I do? You decided to go to recovery. My husband won't. My boyfriend won't. What do I do? What can I expect? Is this really an addiction? So I wrote this book for people like my wife.
He's a porn addict.
He's a porn addict. Now what? And I wrote this with a therapist, and it's so easy to read. This book has sold 20 times the copies of the other two books because these are women who want to get help. These are women who need help for their husbands and their boyfriends. And it's very simple. It's Q&A. It's the 65 most commonly asked questions from female partners. And my friend, who's a therapist, he answers it from having dealt with hundreds, if not well over 1,000 people who have pornography addiction, husband, wives, couples, every makeup. And I answer the questions from the point of view of the former addict. So we don't always agree with each other 100%. And I think that's where a lot of people have said they've appreciated it, is that we're always at least 50, 60% on board with each other, but then we give some other perspectives. And it's been going very well. And I urge any woman who, is in a very early stage of recognizing her husband or boyfriend has pornography addiction, even if he doesn't want to recognize it.
What if she has addictions?
It's basically the same thing that if a guy does. And women are actually one of the most growing areas, because here's the thing. Pornography, mainstream pornography, from the time it was made up until the internet hit, was designed for straight white males, because they were the ones who would show up to the theaters. They were the ones who would go into the head shops and buy the videos. That's who pornography was basically targeted at. Now that the internet has hit, it's so much cheaper to produce pornography. It's so much cheaper to distribute pornography. So you can distribute it to every little minority group, every little demographic you can find, and make money targeting a small group. Women are one of those groups. Black men are one of those groups. Religious people are one of those groups. You've got that these days. And so we're all sexual beings. Just because someone has a vagina doesn't mean they don't like porn, because it turns out they do. And so if that's an addicted situation, it's basically how you deal with a guy. But recoveringpornaddict.com. If anybody has questions, I'm happy to answer them through there.
Well, Josh, thank you so much for being on the Billionaire Lifestyle Podcast.
Thank you so much, Emmett. I appreciate the time to talk to your audience.
All right. Ladies and gentlemen, you understand we are spiritual beings having a physical experience. And you are a human being. This is where that sun comes into play. We're all of a color, because if we're not, we'd be translucent. You see our organs, you see right through us. We'd be like paper, like cellophane. We are made in the image of man, and we're having an experience. That's the being part. This is where we sometimes have problems, is the being part. First of all, you have to do something so primary. You have to love yourself. Most of our problems in this life is because we fall out of love with ourselves. So start with that. And I know we've been talking about porn addiction, but here's something I want you to do. When you get out the shower, drop your towel, because I want you to appreciate the full person that you are and the God body that you were given. It's really important that you really just accept you are who you are and what you are, but you can change it. You can augment it. It just takes time. Look in the mirror and just mouth the words to that person staring back at you. I love you. Just like, I love you. Even like finger gun yourself, like, I love you. Because you cannot really love anyone else until you have love of self. Remember, somebody loves you. You just may not be paying attention to the signals. And with that, I'll leave you. Love you all. Peace.